Hey, welcome back to the Marketer Exchange. One of the things I get asked about most is my time living as a digital nomad and whether it lives up to the hype. So in this episode, I'm talking to Benjamin Jones-Gerrard, who has been living and working out of his van for the last 3 years, traveling around Europe. In the conversation, we get into the realities of van life, the skills that are required to make this lifestyle sustainable, and how designing your work around your life rather than the other way around can change everything. Let's get into it.
Hi, my name is Benjamin and I'm on the Marketer Exchange podcast and I live and work from my van.
Benjamin, so good to have you on. I've been really excited to talk to you. One of the questions people often ask me is about my time living as a digital nomad. And I thought it'd be great to have someone on who's, currently living the dream and doing this. And I know we have a shared affinity for band culture. And we've promised not to talk about bands too much in this episode, but I appreciate you coming on. Just to give people a little bit of context, to give us a little bit, just a quick version of who you are and what you do.
It's an utter pleasure to be here, Zach. Thank you for having me on. My name is Benjamin, and myself and my girlfriend and our dog have lived in a van full-time for 3 years now coming up. I specialize in marketing for small businesses, focusing on clear, simple, effective strategies. Big part of my job is I love storytelling, so be that through creating video and image content for organic or paid socials. But I also do a little bit of SEO work and some mid-level website skills that I utilize. Living and working from the van was simply a deliberate choice just because this is where I do my best work.
As I said, you're living the dream, doing what I think what a lot of people want to do with their lives. I want to kind of start in the middle of the story a little bit, and something that people often don't talk about. And I'm sure you did a whole lot of research before you jumped into this lifestyle, but something that you don't often hear about is, the downsides of doing this. And so, were there any? Are there any things that kind of stood out to you that were unexpected downsides to, working as a marketer while you're living and working in a small space as a digital nomad, traveling around? Any downsides that were unexpected for you?
Well, I guess it must be the marketer in me, but I'm going to frame it as a good thing. So it's obviously a smaller space, so that kind of forces you to be a lot more organized, not only just with like your general lifestyle, but obviously it's myself and my partner that live in this van, and we are both on meetings at some point throughout the day. We have to make sure that our schedules kind of accommodate that, or we have to work around those kind of things. So it really helps you to be organized in that kind of respect. The only other thing is that living in a van also has its own challenges, be that because there's a lot of upkeep that you have to do with that, putting water in the van, dropping the water out, making sure you've got power, Wi-Fi issues depending on where you are. So all of those kind of stuff is stuff that I've had to learn on the road to make sure that it doesn't affect.
Yeah. So, what does that look like for the Wi-Fi side of it? I know we had talked about this before, where you're having to make sure the day before a big meeting or something, you're having to make sure you've got sufficient Wi-Fi there, or you have to travel to get somewhere that does, right?
Yeah. So it's a mixture of things, but 99% of the time I'm just hotspotting off my phone. It's nothing special. Most of the places that we go to around Europe there is 5G. And 5G is more than enough we're having a conversation now over 5G, for example, and it's perfectly fine. We have turned up to places, checked our phone signal and go, oh, actually, we probably can't stay here despite how nice the view is. And I've had to move down the mountain or, along to the next park up just to see if we have better signal. Some people do stuff like have Starlink. It's not really been something that I've necessarily needed, but it is something I would look at if we ever did. And then a backup to all of that. If everything else fails, we can always go to a cafe, buy lunch, buy breakfast or whatever, and hook up to their Wi-Fi and conduct a meeting from there.
So, I want to back up a little bit from there, just rewind a little bit. What originally pushed you in this direction, towards living and working in this way on the road, traveling?
Yeah. So, when I was young, I dreamed of living in a double-decker bus or a treehouse, depending on, I wasn't picky in that respect, I guess. I guess the tipping point, though, was recognizing that traditional living, the high costs, the rigid routines, it just didn't align with the life that I wanted. So backing it up, I guess. So before I lived in the van, I was an outdoors instructor. So I used to take people through like height ropes courses, and then later I taught people how to ride like ATVs and drive other off-road vehicles. I was very good at my job. Well, at least I think I was very good at my job. I progressed to like management roles quite quickly, but my life very much came about helping other people live their adventure and not my own. So moving to a van was kind of like taking back that kind of adventurous nature for myself in some respects. Um, the other thing was I couldn't really rely on those vocations as a steady income while on the road. You can go to adventure parks and rock up and say, "Hey, I've got this experience, etc." But it doesn't really pay very well at the same time. So I, before we hit the road in the van, I lent into what I did as a hobby, which was drone videography. Long story short, over time that progressed as I learned what clients wanted, and now I do what I do.
I mean, I guess if you're picking up work as you land in different places, with your van, you're showing up somewhere trying to go get a job that way is going to be pretty challenging. Whereas if you've got a consistent group of clients, I guess that you're working for remotely, that can be a little more beneficial, or one employer even can be a beneficial way to do that.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing is that, like, realistically in Europe, there's different languages that everyone speaks, and I really only speak one not so well. So having to rock up to a place and say like, I can do this or whatever, it was never going to work. So I lent into my hobby essentially.
Yeah. So you already had that skill set and you were able to leverage that to turn it into paid income, or paid work. So before you made the decision to do this, you probably had a picture in your head of what it would be like. What did you imagine the lifestyle to be, and what surprised you most about this life once you were actually living it?
I think I already had a more romantic version in my head of what it's like. I think most people do about living in a van, how it's maybe a constant adventure. And there's an element that I can spend my free time in places that I enjoy doing, but essentially, I have basically a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job anyway. The only difference is the scenery outside my window changes from week to week. So yeah, from that side of things, I guess it was kind of the same. Um, I think the biggest challenge really was to lose all your stuff. There's only so much you can take with you in a van, as I'm sure you know. Um, and there's a saying when you go walking is you pack your fears. So we always ended up like packing way too much stuff anyway, and trying to squeeze it into the van. But we've now got it to a point where we've done this long enough now that we know what we need, and we've kind of offloaded a lot of stuff over the years.
I'm guessing as a run up to making that move and downsizing, getting rid of things, a big part of that, I would imagine, was doing research and trying to understand, online, looking at other people who are doing this, understanding what this life is going to be like. What were some of the things that you heard, or one thing that you heard online that sounded great about this life, but that just completely fell apart? Was there anything like that?
You see a lot of these like courses you can buy. It's like how to buy my course to see how you can live nomadically, and you don't need the course. I can tell you that. I've never bought one, but I can tell you don't need the course. Um, the Most of the things I saw from online is everyone's sort of displaying again like the romantic version of van life, where it is just a constant adventure. And it's not like that. It is a case of, like I said, I work normal hours. It's just that, yeah, my scenery changes so I can do things that are a bit more um, me, I guess. So, for example, at the moment I'm parked in a ski resort. I can put down my laptop whenever I want, go do a couple of runs, and then come back and carry on. It's a good way of blowing off steam in that kind of respect. It's just having whatever you want to do as a hobby on your doorstep.
Yeah, I think that freedom piece is a huge misconception, right? Like you think I'm gonna be, but like when I went into it, that's what I thought. I'm free. I don't have to work. I'm good. But obviously, and I thought, well, I'll be working for all these different clients. That was true, but you end up spending a lot more time. It is a 9 to 5 still, right? And even more so, sometimes it's hard to switch work off and enjoy the setting that you're in. In New Zealand, I was, this was a long time ago, so it was like before everybody had Wi-Fi. So I was in internet cafe, that you intentionally go to this place because it has internet, and working for a client in the States from New Zealand. And then in that afternoon, I was out trout fishing, in the trout fishing mecca of the world. And so you are free in that sense, but you still have responsibility. You still have clients that a boss, and if that can be your client, one client or multiple clients, you still have people to answer to, and you're not just totally free to go do whatever. But yeah, I guess that's kind of what you're touching on there is one of those misconceptions. And I think that helps transition into this idea of perception versus reality. Are there other big misconceptions that you think people have about digital nomad life or living and working out of a van specifically? A lot of people do this and don't live out of a van. They just digital nomads moving around. But are there misconceptions that beyond that freedom piece?
Yeah, I think most people think it's chaotic, but like I've lent into it and really like that's kind of helped me. You're forced to be very organized in that kind of respect. I wonder. I've never actually had to deal with this, but I do always wonder if people are going to think that I'm a professional in that kind of respect. You kind of think of a person living in a van, it kind of, I don't know, it evokes that image of a bum down by the river almost. So making sure that people, well, clients especially, are taking me seriously was a concern, but I don't really find that being an issue. And I think part of that is because of the type of clients I work with.
Are there practical things that you have done to manage those expectations or to reinforce, that you are a professional, or is it just not been an issue for you?
It's not been an issue, but again, it's kind of the clients that I tend to seek out. So I tend to work with maybe smaller businesses rather than large companies. Everyone has a niche, right? And mine was just happens to line up perfectly with how I live. Like that kind of adventurous nature, travel, all that kind of stuff. That means, I don't only work with people who are in the van community. It can be way broader than that, like adventure travel, skiing, like remote first companies. There's a saying that you get in writing, write what you know. And I actually take a lot of that much broader sense and apply it to the fields I work in, which includes obviously marketing. End of the day, if you really know an industry that you're marketing to, or even more than that, if you're actually a customer in that industry, there's honestly no better position than you can be in because it comes with a certain knowledge base. In those cases, I'm not just bringing my marketing skill set to the table. I'm also bringing like real world insight from my own personal experience as a customer, or maybe being surrounded by people in those kind of communities. I think that really gives me an edge in that kind of respect. It's yeah, all the clients I seem to have worked for have seen me living in a van as an asset rather than being off putting. Um, yeah, marketing is also a pretty ubiquitous industry. Everyone needs it. So no matter what kind of company they run, you'll, you know, you'll everyone needs marketing.
Yeah, this is one of the things I often tell to people who are thinking about getting into marketing is that, marketing is the job, but you can do it for all kinds of businesses, right? Like, what is your passion? You can work in marketing in that field. That's true of other jobs too, but marketing is where you get to really demonstrate and show and communicate to other people your excitement for that industry, right? Like for you, that could be the adventure side of things. It could be the travel side of things. So you're naturally working for clients and for businesses that are in those spaces. Like you could be into it could be travel, it could be vans, it could be motorcycles, it could be tennis shoes or trainers. Like whatever the product is in marketing. It's just a great field because you get to be excited about it and demonstrate that to other people. All right, one last little like slightly negative question, but what's the most overrated part of digital nomad and living in a van?
Um, well, with digital, there are two different things there, I'd say. So with digital nomad, working for you have to make sure that there's always a next client if your contract is running out with someone. So even when you are not working, you're working because you need to find your next paycheck, as it were. Um, if you're lucky and you're able to secure a gig that's kind of like permanent, then great. But that's not always the case in this kind of world, or even in this industry. So yeah, even when you're not working, you can be working just as hard, but for no money. That's kind of, I guess, a bit of a drawback with being self-employed or freelance. Um,
Yeah,
Biggest downside for being a van is that at least here in Europe, not everywhere is free to park. So it's not as if like living in a van just makes all your bills zero. There are times where you do have to have quite expensive months depending on where you're parked. So it's kind of that balancing act between having a good month and where you can go versus, or maybe we're running a bit leaner this month. We should go find a place that we can hold up for cheap for longer.
Yeah, and then on the practical side of that, in terms of finances and, are you able to save more when you're living in a van than you are, paying for a flat or apartment?
Yeah, I would say so. Over the 3 years that we've lived here, we've it's ebbed and flowed depending on our work schedules, I guess. But overall, yeah, we've been able to save money. The goal here is that we are going to live in a van for as long as we can. We have no rush of leaving, but we do want to eventually buy a ski chalet. That's basically the goal that we've set for ourselves at the moment. And then who knows after that? Maybe in 10 years' time, we'll have a yacht, and instead of living nomadically on the road, we'll be living nomadically by the sea.
Amazing, man. You've really embraced this adventurous lifestyle and just, carving out the life that you want. It's just so amazing to see. One of the things that you've mentioned, uh, I've heard you talk about before is the need to be a jack of all trades. And yeah, I've heard you describe yourself as that, how important is having that wide marketing skill set to being able to sustain the lifestyle that you have?
Really important, I would say. I like to work closely and personally with my clients, which is why I tend to work with small businesses rather than large companies. And from that, they are facing new challenges every day. Um, Most of the time, they enter something with an idea, but the reality on the ground is maybe they're not quite ready to go into that yet. Like for example, you could go into saying, "Oh, well, I've thought of this marketing budget." But what is that information based on? Have you looked at maybe like what kind of profit margin you have already, et cetera, et cetera? Um, so having a wide set of skill set matters a lot because you don't want to just box yourself into one area. You want to be as well marketable really to your client as possible, whether or not that means you've been brought in to do A, but you can also do X, Y, and Z as well.
What was the sequence of offerings that you provide for businesses? Was it because you said you did the drone footage, that was sort of a hobby, and you turned it into business for yourself. Was that the first skill or offering that you had for clients, and then you moved because you do website stuff too? Was it that? What was the sequence there?
Yeah, so in my last role, my last like full time permanent role, where I was on the payroll, as it were, I did a little bit of marketing through for the company. So I kind of self taught a little bit of meta ads, and I did a lot of the videography, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where it really first started for me. When I walked away from that, I lent into the drone videography because I really enjoyed flying drones anyway. I already had a passion for video editing, so that kind of like naturally worked together. Um, when I got on the road, I kind of realized that it was a bit more challenging to, again, approach clients with this product that I was essentially selling, which was myself being like, well, I can come to your site, I can film stuff, I can go away, I can edit this stuff and then give it back to you. Most of the people that I was approaching actually was like, well, we've also got this kind of footage as well. Could you include this into the advert that you're going to make for us? Which is great. Um, so then it kind of snowballed from that, and I kind of moved away more from the drone aspect and lent more into the video editing. Um, then off the back of that, I kind of got lucky with one of the larger clients that I've worked for, who sort of let me do a bit more image stuff. I kind of learned a bit more about the meta side of things and SEO and Google Ads and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of really helped when it came to approaching other clients in the future, where I was like, well, I can also do this for you and this for you and this for you. Where I really present myself as a visual storyteller. So I will approach people and say, well, I can make these kind of assets for you to market as you will, or I can also help you then move into like make those ads for you and run them for you. Um, and that's kind of where I'm at today.
Okay, so you got the visual side with the drone footage, videography more generally. You've also got the paid social with meta ads that you offer, and then is there website work that you mentioned as well?
Yeah. So again, it's kind of just ended up that way. That really started when I was a teenager with MySpace. Yeah, blast from the past. I'm really showing my age there. But you could also like create like special custom profiles on MySpace, and I kind of learned a lot of HTML coding from that. So it's kind of this thing I had in I always had dormant in me, and it's just become useful when helping with clients with like website stuff. I think they really well, I find that clients really appreciate it if instead of just communicating with the web developer, if you can just log in on WordPress or whatever and make those changes, obviously with permission, um, it really streamlines that process. And that's kind of, I mean, I know what the business wants. The business wants results. They don't want this kind of like back and forth and fluff before you can see the results. They kind of just want to get to the end game. So wherever I can streamline the process, I try and leverage what skills I have to help that.
So with all those different skills that you've mentioned, what skills have turned out to be the non-negotiables?
Organization being the main one. You need to make sure that when juggling multiple clients, that you've got all your ducks in a row and you're not missing deadlines for any of those clients. Otherwise, it's not sustainable at that point. So organization is paramount for anything that I would do. The most useful ones that I use day to day is really your social media, be that organic or paid, um, and being able to read the data and present it in a way that your client's going to understand that the work you're doing is moving the needle. As long as you've kind of got those three, that kind of organization, your main meat of it, which is in my case your organic, social, and stuff, um, and being able to report on that, you're kind of most of the way there. SEO has become kind of like a big feather in my cap recently, and I'm going to try and lean more into that as I go on.
Were there skills that you thought going into this, these are going to be non-negotiables, I'm going to need these, but they've actually turned out to be, they matter a lot less than you expected?
Yeah, I thought I would be doing a lot more video editing for clients, and I do a lot of video editing, but maybe not as much as I first kind of thought I would be doing. That's kind of very much taken. I would say I would spend about maybe 20-25% of my time video editing, where before that was kind of like what I thought my whole shtick would be. It's now very much more leaning into your social media. Mainly images is what I found has become very prominent. I find myself in Canva a lot nowadays, which is something I didn't expect. I thought I would be much more in Adobe Pro, but it's just kind of the way that the clients wanted it to go. So that's the way it's gone.
Yeah, so you're having to do, this is the thing, right? You think if I'm going to be freelance or if I'm going to be working for one client and not on the payroll, essentially, I'm my own boss. But in reality, you still have a boss and sometimes multiple bosses if you're doing multiple clients. But yeah, it's just the reality of it. Yeah, you talked about how your services have had to, and your offering has had to evolve over time. How do you approach upskilling and cross skilling and identifying new things that you need to learn? Like, what's your general approach to that?
You just see where the gaps in the market are. Like I said, I work with smaller companies, so there's always for lack of a better word, sometimes a lack of knowledge in some of those companies, and you are being looked at as the arbiter of all marketing knowledge. You know what magic levers to push, etc., etc. You need to sometimes maybe learn which lever to pull. So it's really a case of kind of a case by case basis. If a client asks me to do something and I don't know it, I'm excited to learn what that is, and I can go away. There's loads of resources online anyway to learn whatever you don't know, and I already have a foundational knowledge where I can understand most things and pick it up pretty quickly. There's great resources out there. Like I taught myself how to use GA4, for example, using like the free Google Blueprint, I think it is, or it might be Meta Blueprint, one of the two. So there's loads of kind of skills and workshops out there that can help you learn new stuff. Actually, one thing I'm learning at the moment is uh, organizing for ChatGPT and all that kind of stuff, because that's where the next kind of big step is where you need to be aggregating the data on the website so ChatGPT can read it, because most people are searching that way nowadays. So it's constantly learning new things, looking for the way the market's going, the way the wind's blowing, and yeah.
Have you got any more specifics on how you're using Gen AI tools like ChatGPT? How's that changing your workflow or your offering in any way?
Really, I think the main driver at the moment for me is sort of leaning into FAQs, as that's kind of like a big place where ChatGPT is kind of like looking into the data. Obviously, keywords is kind of a big deal, but yeah, it's mainly you're finding a lot of clients aren't really aware or are a bit hesitant to put FAQs on their web pages, but it's a really great place to start to get picked up by those large language models. Um, Really, that's kind of where the surface is at the moment. Other than that, it's just using tools like SEMrush to see how you're appearing to AI chatbots and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where my level is at the moment. Like I said, I'm learning, but that's not a bad thing.
Absolutely, all of us are learning AI right now, and probably all feel behind the 8 ball, like we're still like we're behind schedule, but, I think everybody feels that way. I've talked to AI trainers, like people who train people in AI tools, and they're like, "Yeah, I do too." It's so fast, it's hard to keep on top of it all.
Sure. But the important thing is as a marketer, you've got to evolve with technology, and that's yeah. As long as you're trying to stay on top of that ball, yeah, you're halfway there, right?
Yeah, so if you've got that general attitude that, like, I'm not just gonna learn something and then that's it, but I've got a continuous, learning for the rest of my life as a marketer, I think that's the general attitude people need to approach it with, right, to keep growing.
Absolutely.
You've talked about, keeping things simple. It really stood out to me when we talked before, and, I wonder how that mindset for you shows up in the way that you approach the marketing work that you do, the offerings that you provide for clients, your relationships with clients, like how does that keep it simple strategy for you? How does that play out in your everyday life?
Yeah, I mean, when approaching any task, you kind of just want to cut. Well, I personally cut the fluff because there's no point in making things overcomplicated. I guess if the simple way of doing it is going to yield the same results. Um, so I try and make sure that any ad campaign that I run, already know where the goal is going to be, and you try and make the moves to hit that goal. And if something's not working, you know, there's no harm in changing it. I do that by either running like a lot of A/B testing and seeing what is working out of those two things. Um, but clear messaging is kind of really um, where people find like that's where audiences are most receptive. If the message is clear straight away and upfront, I find that tends to be more engaging. Um, if you overcomplicate it, you're going to lose interest in this world where people have a finite amount of interest anyway. You kind of want to make sure that the point you're driving is simple and clear.
Are there things that you can think of that you've stopped doing that have made a big difference in that way? So as you've tried to simplify and keep things simple, are there things that you've stopped doing that have made a big change?
Yeah, wordy adverts. I have been victim to making copy maybe a bit too long in the past, just because I'm trying to get as much information in as possible. But really, that's kind of not the. I don't think that's the necessarily the point of the advert. You want to kind of put the key points and get them to site where they will then find more information about product if it's something that interests them. Um, yeah, also putting too much copy in like the actual creative of the advert itself. Again, we live in an age where people's attention is finite, so you want to make sure that you grab them there and then, get them over, and then yeah, let the website do the talking essentially. You can see from analytics that people's attention span, especially at the top funnel, is very limited. So you really want to grab that attention where you can.
Yeah, so simplifying the hook, getting them to the website, and then that's where you can provide them with more information once they've clicked through. That's a really good insight there. So not over wordy copy in your initial ad, top of the funnel advertising, reduce the word count there essentially. Yeah. So it's still related to simplicity and a very practical level now in terms of your life and working and living in the same space. How do you organize that? How do you organize your time? How do you stay focused? Just living in a tight space like that, working and living in the same space.
Yeah, it's essentially I do live in a 6 by 12 foot box, which sounds like it could be pretty cabin fever sometimes, but We have ways of managing it, let's say. So our living area converts into an office space when we need it to. We have a desk that kind of folds out of our sofa, that me and my girlfriend can both sit by. So that kind of changes the space enough that we feel like it's different when we're in work mode, as we call it, compared to weekend mode. And then further than that, just taking like breaks every now and again. We're so lucky that we have this opportunity to have the world on our doorstep. We do regularly, just put the laptop down for 5 minutes, go take the dog for a walk through whatever meadow we're parked up or along the river, or essentially. Um, and that can really help. It can really help, refresh what you're doing at the desk at that time, or re-energize those creative juices. I feel like I would get cabin fever in a mansion if I didn't do those things. So, size of the space doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's such a good insight too. Like, it doesn't really matter the size of the space, but, if you're not getting out and, touching grass, as the kids say these days, um, then, you're gonna get cabin fever even in a big house. Yeah, really interesting.
The other thing is that, like, um, I mean, I obviously used to live in houses, not as if I've always done this. And I would say that the van is far more comfortable than any house I've ever owned or rented. So that helps as well.
Yeah, I guess, like, being able to design it yourself, whereas a home would have been designed by somebody else. You can design this space for exactly what you need, and as you said, it converts from, living space to our weekend, what'd you call it? The weekend space versus the
Weekend mode.
workspace?
Weekend mode. Yeah, you got to.
Weekend.
I do enjoy weekend mode. It makes our sofa like 3 times the size, which is fantastic.
Nice.
Also, from like, I don't know, maybe it's just English houses, but they're always cold or expensive to heat, and the water pressure was never good. Where I have a shower here that's the hottest shower I've ever used, and it's got the best pressure of any shower I've ever owned. So it's almost like I've upgraded, living in a van, not downgraded at all.
When we spoke before, you said that I think you said that you had, started the van while you were still in a house, but then you were finishing it, still converting it, did it all yourselves, and you were converting it while you were on the road. Were there, systems that you designed, or, parts of the van that you designed for work and weekend mode that didn't work, that you then changed till you found something that worked for you?
Yeah, there was quite a few design iterations, should we say. This is actually the way the van is set out at the moment is our V2. So originally, we had a sideboard along the front of our van, which only really one of us could use, but it was kind of like we had to swap depending on who was on the meeting. So we quickly realized that didn't work, and we really needed a table. So that's where our V2 has come in with the table. And then just little things along the way, like we used to have what we affectionately called a wine cellar, which is basically like a trap door on the floor of the van where we used to keep our contraband. But that's kind of gone the way of the goose now, and we've decided instead that it's much better for storage in general. Um, just like what I'm doing with marketing, it's ever evolving, and eventually you kind of land on a way that works. There's no shame in changing things, even though you think at the time you know it's right. Sometimes real world hits, and maybe that's not the way it has to go.
Yeah, you touched on something there, and you mentioned it earlier too, that, the challenge of having 2 people, so you and your partner are both working, so you're on calls, she's on calls. How do you manage that? Do you try to schedule calls at different times? Or but you're doing client work, so how do you manage that challenge?
It's not always possible to schedule calls to happen at different times, just because our various clients' demands. They may happen to actually cross over, and they do want to call on the same time. So there's two different ways that we can sort of combat this. One of us will potentially sit in the actual cab of the van, and the other will take the call in the living side, as we call it, and the other person can take it in the cab. With how like Google Meet does stuff nowadays, you can put a background on, so no one would know it. No one would know that you're in a van, let alone in the cab of a van. Alternatively, if we don't think that's going to work for whatever reason, one of us can always take a walk to a cafe and conduct our calls from there. So it's just a case of communicating. I mean, we obviously live in such a small space that we're always talking to each other, always making sure that we're not getting on top of each other. So having that kind of communication there is paramount as well. to living in a van.
Yeah, when you gave me the tour of your van previously, I noticed that you had kept the bulkhead or put one in to separate the cab from the living space. And I've always heard people talk about wanting that open so you can quickly get out of where you are if you need to, for security reasons, essentially. But I guess there's security benefits for keeping that bulkhead too. But that's another benefit for keeping that bulkhead is so you can have multiple meetings if you've got two people or more.
Yeah, a lot of people it's the bulkhead thing is it really splits people down the middle whether or not you should have it or not. And I think I say down the middle. I think a majority of people don't have it. We decided to keep it because of we do a lot of skiing, and it's the windows, the cab windows, are the biggest loss of thermal heat. So that whole bulkhead is thermally insulated, and we do have a sliding door for security. So if we ever did need to dive into the cab for whatever reason, it just slides open and we can crawl in. So it's no issue. We've got the best of both worlds in that kind of respect.
Well, part of what you do is creating content for clients pretty consistently, right? For one client, I guess essentially at the moment, but in the past you've done multiple clients, and that kind of creates another tension because I know you guys have your own socials, which I'll give you a chance to tell us about in a minute. But what's your relationship like with maintaining social media presence for clients, but also your own social media? How do you deal with that? That I don't know that challenge of managing both of those.
I'm quite selective about my own social media, ironically. It's weird. The more fulfilled I have been with my life, the less I feel I need to broadcast it. So I kind of treat it as more of a tool, not a performance. And I kind of use my own social media to see what trends are out there rather than actually, putting myself out there. Although I have, for my New Year's resolution, actually decided I will put myself more out there on social media because I feel like I have that opportunity, and, I really, really should. But it has been really refreshing living my life and not, screaming and shouting about it, is what I'd say. That lack of broadcasting my own life has really helped me influence the creatives for my clients, because I can put all that energy and all those creative juices into the visuals that I want to tell for my clients.
Have you found that there are like practical steps that you need to make, right? Like these social media platforms and content, these things are designed to be as addictive as possible, right? They're trying to sell our eyeballs to other people. So are there things that you've had to do practically um to remove yourself from social media? Like for me personally, I know that it's just so addictive. If it's like I charge my phone downstairs, I don't bring it upstairs. I don't bring it into the bedroom. So are there practical things that you've done like this that, um, again, smaller space, so charging the phone somewhere else may not be an option, but are there practical things that you've done to kind of counter some of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of a YouTube addict, I have to say. I love learning about new stuff, and that's kind of how I keep up with like world events and stuff. So I use the screen time app that you get on iPhone as standard, and I just make sure that it kind of locks it down after a certain time. And I try my best to adhere to that where possible. But consuming content on social media, I guess because I'm in that world, I kind of sometimes just find what's out there maybe a bit cringy sometimes. So I naturally get the ick, as the kids say, when I watch certain content, and that kind of really like takes me out of it, at least. Um, so yeah, I also just think it might be just my algorithm. My algorithm on like Instagram and Facebook is very professional in that kind of respect, because that's kind of the content that interests me. Um, and when you spend a whole 8 to 10 hours a day working, the last thing you want to do is do more work potentially. So I find that kind of naturally easily to step away from. But I can see how it can be a challenge for a lot of people. And I like what you said about leaving your phone in another room. We could do that, I guess, but yeah, it's just another thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you said too about the more content you are with your life or the happier you are with your life, the less you feel like you need to share it with other people. Because I think for people who are just primarily consuming social media, that's not the sense that they would get from watching other people online. It's if you're happy and you're content with your life, then those are the people that are sharing, right? Because all the content that we ever see is people talking about how amazing their lives are. Um, and I do think it puts people off. pushing content. It does for me for sure. I've had to push myself to even to do this podcast, to push myself out there like that. And you talked about having to do that for yourself. Like I've got clients, coaching clients that I talk to are like, look, you've got to do this. You've got to grow your business. You need to be putting yourself out there. And it's just so hard when, you just feel like, I don't want to be that guy. But so that's good to know, though, that that's a challenge for other people, right? That people are like you guys are pushing content. You've got a TikTok account. It is polished as it can look. It takes effort and to just put yourself out there like that. So
Sure. And I mean, like I said, I'm using those creative juices in work. So yeah, I feel like my free time, I want to do something that maybe not is recording, or filming or editing for my own socials. It's kind of, yeah, it's one of those things where, like I said, it's as for my New Year's resolution, I do want to put myself out there more. Like I said, I just feel like I have the opportunity to, but I do so knowing that it's a double-edged sword and it will take more of my time. So yeah, but it like you've touched on there, it's becoming important now for my own work is to put myself out there. That's how people are going to find you. After all, it's the new your new storefront on a high street is your social media, is your LinkedIn, is your Instagram or Facebook profile. So it is important to keep that cultivated. Um, it's just, I guess I probably have the opposite issue to what most people have, where they spend too much time on social media. I feel like, yeah, I'm reluctant to do so.
So looking back on this whole transition of going from, living in, you've been on the road 3 years, right? In your van for 3 years.
Yeah, coming up to 3 years now.
So looking back on that transition from going to, more traditional life in a house and a home and moving into your van and traveling and working, and thinking about what you did to prepare to make that shift. What marketing skills, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but what marketing skills or even mindset would you prioritize earlier on? And then are there things that you would ignore now?
Yeah, I mean, like, if I could advise my past self, I'd say you already understand how business generate revenue, so you just need to articulate the value in that. Um, so skills matter, but your positioning matters more, kind of thing. Like you need to be able to um, know what the business wants, and you need to communicate what value you're going to add to that. 90% of the clients I've landed are because you already understand what they want and you can say, well, I know I can do this. So it's not necessarily about learning new skills, but knowing the skills that you already have. And how does that help you sell that to the business?
You talked about organization being one of the things that's really important for living this lifestyle. But are there other things that this lifestyle forces you to be better at? Whether you want to or not, you have to be better at this.
I guess, yeah, selling myself. Marketing is essentially just sales. It's just a kind of a different cover you put on it. Um, but if you can't sell yourself, you can't sell the product. So it's really being able to do those elevator pitches, for lack of a better word, to grab that client. I'm normally better if I manage to get sat down with a client and we're having a face to face, well, camera to camera conversation. Um, I know at that point I'm pretty much a shoe in, but it's getting them to that point. So it's being able to present yourself over email to get them to the point where they're sitting down to you, and then you'll be able to sell yourself. Those are all really important things that I probably didn't appreciate when I first started this gig. Um, I mean, I come from a background of customer service, so I'm great when it comes to in person. Um, but now it's digital, and there's different ways of presenting yourself, be that over just text only or virtually. You need to. I needed to learn to transition those skills to that kind of environment.
So there are going to be some people who, listening to this and they're like, yeah, this life is not for me. I don't want to live in a van. I don't want to live in a box as you described it. Uh, so people that don't want that lifestyle, what lessons from your experience do you think still apply to people who are looking to build a strong marketing career?
Well, even if you never live in a van, the core lesson is to, you know, consciously design your work environment. The goal is alignment wherever you live. So what really is going to serve your best output? Be that, a dedicated area in your house where you can work, and then you can sort of, like an office that you can shut that door and then you can go away. That can be your weekend mode. Or is it a case of just making sure that your organization doesn't affect your personal life? Um, Key thing is to keep those things separate, because you will perform better when you feel fulfilled. Um, there's no point in being fulfilled at work if it's miserable at home, for lack of a better way of putting it. Um, you know, you can choose what to do, and you can love what you do, but it shouldn't take away from your life.
Yeah. One thing I know people are gonna be curious about is, and I've been keeping it as a little teaser for, the end here, but, what's your current location? Where are you located at the moment?
So I've spent most of early this year in Portugal surfing. I'm now making my way across the Pyrenees, and I'm visiting all the little ski resorts as I go. Currently, I'm parked in a place called Saint Larry, which is the biggest ski resort in the Pyrenees outside of Andorra. And I'm hoping to continue along the Pyrenees all the way to, oh, I don't know, see where the road goes, I guess.
So I'm sure as soon as we finish this call, you're gonna go jump on the slopes, I'm sure. That's pretty exciting.
And literally, yeah, my snowboard is sitting just off camera, just over there.
That's amazing. Well, now I feel guilty. I don't wanna take any more of your time. Um, where can people find out more about you?
You can find me on TikTok at Wilderness to Waves, or on Instagram at Wilderness to Waves. And that's, yeah, you'll see all our adventures there.
Amazing. Benjamin, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know people are gonna get so much out of this, so thanks a lot.
Zach, it's been a pleasure, mate. All the best.